It is strange how the completely ordinary, harmless, almost forgettable moments in my life turned into police encounters, simply because one woman decided that I looked suspicious. And even now, when I think back on those days, I still feel that uncomfortable mix of disbelief and humiliation, because in both situations I was doing nothing more than trying to manage my health and spend time with my family. Yet somehow I ended up having to justify my existence to law enforcement officers in public spaces, where I had every legal right to be. And the most unsettling part is not even the police involvement itself, but the realization that all it takes is one person's assumption to transform an ordinary moment into something that feels criminal. The first incident happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, after I had finished a therapy session that left me feeling emotionally exposed and physically unsettled. Because I have been living with diagnosed panic disorder for 3 years, and although most days I function normally and hold a steady job and maintain relationships like anyone else, there are moments when my body reacts faster than my mind can control, and I experience racing thoughts, tightness in my chest, dizziness, and that overwhelming sensation that something catastrophic is about to happen, even when I know logically that I am safe. And on that particular afternoon, my therapist and I had discussed some difficult memories that stirred up more anxiety than I anticipated. So when I walked back to my car, I could already feel the early signs of an episode building, and I knew from experience that it would be irresponsible and potentially dangerous to start driving immediately, because the clinic's small parking lot was full that day. I had parked along the quiet residential street beside a row of beige townhouses that looked identical, except for small decorative differences in their porches, and after getting into my car, I closed the door, turned off the engine, reclined the seat slightly, and focused on breathing slowly while I reached into the center console for the small orange prescription bottle that contains the fast-acting anti-anxiety medication my psychiatrist instructed me to use during acute episodes. And as I tried to twist open the cap, my hands were shaking enough that I had to pause twice just to steady myself before I could swallow one pill with a sip of lukewarm water from a plastic bottle in my cup holder, reminding myself that the medication would take about 15 to 20 minutes to settle my nervous system, and that waiting was the responsible choice. At that moment, I believed I was alone in my struggle, simply another person sitting quietly inside a parked vehicle. But after several minutes, I noticed the curtains in one of the townhouses across the street shift slightly, as though someone had been watching, and quickly moved back. And although I tried to ignore it because I did not want to fill my anxiety with paranoia, the curtains moved again, and I caught a clearer glimpse of a woman standing behind the glass, staring directly at my car with an intensity that felt less like casual curiosity and more like scrutiny. And within moments, the front door of that townhouse opened, and she stepped outside onto the porch, with her arms folded tightly across her chest and her posture rigid in a way that communicated judgment before she had even spoken. She appeared to be in her late 50s or early 60s, with short blonde hair styled neatly and large sunglasses shielding her eyes despite the mild sunlight. And she remained standing there for nearly a full minute before walking down her driveway toward the sidewalk while maintaining a deliberate distance from my vehicle. And because I sensed her suspicion growing, I rolled my window down slightly and gave a small, polite wave while explaining that I had an appointment nearby and just needed a few minutes before driving, hoping that a simple explanation would dissolve whatever concern she had formed. Instead of relaxing, she asked sharply why I had been sitting there so long and what exactly I was doing inside the car. And when I answered honestly that I had taken prescribed medication because I was not feeling well enough to drive, her entire demeanor shifted in a way that made it clear she had already drawn her own conclusions. And she stated that they did not tolerate drug activity in their neighborhood, which stunned me because I was holding a legally prescribed medication bottle with my name printed clearly on the label. Yet her assumption had already converted that orange container into evidence of wrongdoing in her mind. I tried to remain calm and explained again that it was prescription medication for anxiety and that I was simply waiting for it to take effect. But she shook her head dismissively and retreated into her house without acknowledging my explanation. And within less than 5 minutes, a police cruiser turned onto the street and parked behind my car, a sight that made my stomach drop because it confirmed that she had called the police on me for sitting quietly in my own vehicle while managing a medical condition. And when the officer approached my window, I rolled it down fully and kept my hands visible on the steering wheel as I explained the entire situation with as much clarity as my lingering anxiety would allow. The officer remained professional and asked to see the prescription bottle, which I handed over while feeling an embarrassing mix of vulnerability and defensiveness. And after verifying that my name, doctor, and pharmacy information were legitimate, he informed me that I was not breaking any laws because I was legally parked and in possession of prescribed medication, though he added that residents sometimes become nervous about unfamiliar cars lingering in the area, a comment that may have been intended to ease tension, but instead reinforced the uncomfortable reality that my mere presence had been deemed suspicious enough to warrant police involvement. Although the officer eventually returned to his cruiser and left, the woman emerged again and approached my window to insist that I leave, because their community looked out for each other. And when I calmly pointed out that the street was public property and that I had every right to be there, she delivered the phrase that continues to echo in my memory: "If you weren't doing anything wrong, you shouldn't mind." A statement that reduces the emotional impact of being treated like a criminal to a trivial inconvenience and ignores the deeper issue of how quickly suspicion replaces empathy in certain spaces. I eventually drove home once the medication steadied me, but the humiliation lingered, and in the weeks that followed I found myself hyper-aware of where I parked and how long I remained in my car, as though I had absorbed the message that existing quietly in public required justification. And although I tried to brush off the incident as an isolated misunderstanding, life had a way of proving that it was part of a broader pattern. Several months later, on a bright Saturday afternoon in early spring, I went to a local park with my sister and her 2 children, Emma and Ryan, because she needed to take a work call and asked me to supervise them at the playground while she sat nearby on a bench. And I gladly agreed because spending time with them is one of the simplest joys in my life. So I pushed Emma on the swing while Ryan ran around pretending to be a superhero. And at one point, a young boy around Emma's age struggled to climb the rope ladder to the slide while his mother stood a short distance away managing a stroller. And noticing his frustration, I asked from a respectful distance if he needed help and simply pointed out where to place his foot and how to grip the rope more securely without touching him, after which he successfully climbed to the top and thanked me with a grin. The interaction lasted no more than 10 seconds, yet I became aware of a woman sitting on a nearby bench staring at me with the same tight-lipped suspicion I had seen months earlier on that residential street, and she approached to question whether I knew the child and stated that man should not be speaking to other people's children at playgrounds, despite the fact that my niece and nephew were playing only a few feet away and I had done nothing inappropriate. And rather than continuing the conversation, she pulled out her phone and stepped aside. And within minutes, a police officer entered the playground area and walked directly toward me, while children continued playing around us. When the officer explained that they had received a call about a man approaching children, I felt a chilling sense of déjà vu as I clarified that I was with my niece and nephew and had only offered verbal guidance to a child struggling on the equipment. And thankfully, the boy's mother confirmed that she had no concerns and appreciated the assistance, after which the officer apologized for the inconvenience and left. Yet the damage had already been done because the public nature of the accusation and the presence of law enforcement had transformed a normal family outing into a spectacle that made me feel scrutinized and distrusted. Both incidents share a common thread that extends beyond individual misunderstanding and touches on a broader social dynamic in which certain people assume authority over public spaces and interpret unfamiliar presence as threat rather than neutrality. And while I understand that vigilance can stem from a desire for safety, there is a difference between reasonable caution and reflexive suspicion that escalates into calling the police without attempting basic human conversation first. And what troubles me most is how quickly ordinary behavior, sitting in a car to take prescribed medication or speaking briefly to a child in full view of their parent and one's own family, can be reframed as criminal simply because someone decides it looks out of place. I do not hate the women involved in either incident, because I believe they likely perceive themselves as protectors of their community. Yet their actions revealed how fragile dignity can feel when filtered through someone else's fear, and how exhausting it is to repeatedly prove that you are not a threat while navigating the already challenging terrain of mental health and everyday life. And although the officers in both situations handled matters professionally and without hostility, the experience left me more aware of how easily ordinary moments can spiral into official encounters, reinforcing my determination to continue existing unapologetically in public spaces, while also recognizing that sometimes the greatest challenge is not managing anxiety itself, but confronting the assumptions of strangers who mistake difference or unfamiliarity for danger.